What we're talking about is a software that does work. Belief does work. It's the software of the mind. It does work. It's operating perfectly. The question is, how are you going to use it? Anna's saying, good job. Congratulations on total transformation. Thank you for your voice and the way you articulate. I'm able to be receptive to the knowledge from one soul to another. I am grateful. Great insight. Thank you, Anna. Slim said, you speak on the software of the spirit. How important is your choice of words? Because I write a certain software in the wrong language, it won't work. Oh, I like that. I call it the software of the mind. The reason I chose the metaphor is because if you, Slim said, if you were to write a program in a software that was unrecognizable, the software doesn't work. If you've chosen the wrong programming language, you don't have a software. It's not operational. What we're talking about is a software that does work. Belief does work. It's the software of the mind. It does work. It's operating perfectly. The question is, how are you going to use it? It's operating perfectly. The question is, how are you going to use it? That understanding is critical, because once you understand that you have software in your mind, you can decide how you wish to interface with it. You can decide how you wish to use it. Are you going to use it for good stuff or bad stuff? You could reprogram your confidence in such a way that it's no longer useful to you. If people start poking holes in the narrative you've been telling yourself, if people start coming around and saying, man, that's never going to work, it didn't really work that time, someone can convince you, oh, this is actually a good conversation, hold on, we're about to get deep for just a second. If someone can convince you that your old ways, all the things that you were confident about, all the things that you've ever done were actually nothing, were actually very small, little, if they've convinced you of that, then they're reprogramming that belief that you've once placed in confidence, and they're reprogramming it into a way that that confidence no longer works for you. And now they've corrupted the software of your mind. They've corrupted the software of that governed your capacity for confidence. Why is that deep? Because straight up, I'm gonna tell you, in this book, just before we even we're not even in chapter 1 by the time I mention this, but before we get into, and I think somewhere in the foreword, or maybe it's the intro or something like this, I'm talking about the only slaves. Think about enslavement, the nature of enslavement. When people enslave another person, the only person that could ever be enslaved is a person that is forced to believe that they already actually are that slave. Slavery is not about, no one can grab you by the hand and make you do the work. People are going to threaten you with dying until you begin to believe that this is your lot in life. And once that happens, a little bit of maintenance, but the person they basically enslave themselves, because they're not going anywhere. They're not going to run away. In other words, the only slaves there ever are people who allow others to decide what they believe. People who allow others to decide what they believe. This is not any sort of shaming. It's just a way of understanding how the mind works. The first, if you had to enslave some people, and no one does, but if you had to, if you were going to, let me just talk about how it was done, and just particularly, slave, different types of slavery throughout all of history, but none quite like the transatlantic slave trade, right? So, in that situation, the first group are the toughest to break. But once you can reprogram the next generation with the belief, they have no last name, they have no history. These are people without history. In academia, we talk about once you have a military operation that can convince a population that they are a people without history. They are a people without any last name, no surname. You get what I'm saying? They have there's no connection to anything else. You're breaking their belief that they were something else other than what you've told them. And when you do that, the children that they have come up with the same belief, because no one has there are no new beliefs. There is no vocabulary. There's no library of belief to go and tap into so that people can see themselves anew. And so you end up getting the slave thing on autopilot because people, they believe that's who they are. Harriet Tubman, had this, she's such a powerful example. If y'all have never seen the Dr. Umar Johnson interviews, go watch those that are on the Dr. Shawn Smith channel. go watch those, because we talk a little bit about Harriet Tubman, and this woman, first general to ever, lead an army that was a woman in the United States, in United States history. But this woman, she said, look, I freed hundreds of people. I freed hundreds of folks. But I would have freed thousands, except they never knew that they were even slaves. They never even knew. To them, it was just the way things were. And so when it comes to our own dreams, when it comes to our own miracles, if we're constantly allowing other people to dictate and determine what we believe, we're allowing them to reprogram, as Slim Sid is saying, the software of the mind, and only makes it work in a certain fashion, a fashion that's away from our dreams, a fashion that's away from our highest purpose. In that way, the metaphor remains consistent, and it also shines light on the experience that we're talking about. Okay, so Slim Sid saying love it, but because in programming, to execute a code, you call it a script. So if you follow the script, and that language, what is it programming you to be? Exactly. The programming is a script. It is a language that you are completely reading off of. Bro, yes, it is important to take spiritual responsibility even over that script. And what I'm saying is that when you can divest yourself of human limitation, what you end up with is a God essence. And from there, you can now begin to ask new questions. You can now begin with a new script. You can reset in a new way, because there is something that's unblemished in you. There is something that is pristine in you. There is something that is always crystal clean in you. I call it the root of existence, and our point is to return to your root. You'll notice the first video is called Return to Your Roots. The first thing that has to happen before we can do anything else. I don't even want anybody watching the video that we're doing a deep dive on. I don't even want anyone watching that video until people have begun to return to their root. We don't need to be asking any higher reprogramming questions until we return to our root, until we return to awareness, until we return to supreme consciousness, period. Don't need to. What you trying to manifest for if you don't know who you really are? Or you only have a fragmented understanding of who you really are. I'm not talking about intellectually, I'm talking about in your experience. The very experience of who you are needs to be expansive. Then when I say, hey, look, ask a few of these questions to prod your human mind into aligning with purpose, doesn't seem like a stretch. That makes sense? Hey, it's Dr. Shawn Smith, and if that message resonated with you, then be sure to watch this video. I know it will serve you.